to the camera. There we go. It is 9 o'clock. I'm calling the meeting to order. Acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tloga First Nation. Notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published in the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. And through the members' consent, if there are no objections, I'll move that pursuant to section 15 of the District of Tofino meeting procedure bylaw number 1229/2016 is amended November 24th, 2022 special meeting via Zoom and live broadcasted on District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall 380 Campbell Street in Tofino, BC. Seeing no objection, that motion is carried. Item 3, and I'm amending the agenda to move item 6.1 to 5.1 just after public comment on agenda items. So if there's no objection, then I will move through unanimous consent that the November 24, 2022 special council agenda be adopted as amended to move item 6.1 to follow the public comment period as item 5.1. Seeing no objection, that great. We have a public comment on agenda items. Ms. Best.
Thank you, Mayor Law. There are currently no members of the public meeting, so we do not have any.
Okay, perfect. Then we move on to the amended 5.1, which is the District of Tofino Administrative Housekeeping Amendment Bylaw. And this is for adoption. Any comments from council? I have a reader, please.
I will move that administrative housekeeping amendment bylaw number 1/5/2022 be adopted.
Seconder, Councilor McMaster. Any comments from council? All in favor? None opposed, motion is carried. Then we will move on to 5.2, I guess it would be financial 2023-2027 draft financial plan. We have a report from corporate services.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What's up? Your PowerPoint. Yes, I don't have it right now. Oh, I'll give you a stick. I'm sorry. Here? Yes. Okay, I apologize. We were a little delayed, but no problem.
Okay.
Here. I thought Laura was starting apologies and she was going to just share a screen.
It's all good.
So here we go.
Welcome. First budget meeting. 2023-2027 financial plan.
Sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say, turn one of the side light off so it doesn't have that glare. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, not at all. That's probably a good thing. I look better.
Good. That's better. I can see. You can see the screen better. Yeah, thanks.
So today we're going to actually split up the day and start with an overview of where we are in 2022 operating budget. So I'll start off with some highlights of that report, and then we'll go into some more detail at the departmental level. I could probably go. I would apologize. Quicker.
It's just the right arrow and give it a 1/2-second delay.
So, oops.
Oh, no, 1 second. There we go.
So I just want to remind council that the information provided here is unaudited, subject to change, and that for the numbers that we're presenting are as of September 30th, 2022, but we will, where we can, provide you with some information that's recently happened or forecasted to occur before year end. As always, please stop me and raise your hand or speak out if you have any questions. So for 2022 property taxation, staff mailed out approximately 1,700 property tax notices, and these are mailed out at the end of May. We have approximately 1,400 folios, but with multiple owners on title that amounted to approximately 1,700 notices mailed out by staff. Taxes were due July 4th. The first business day in July, usually set by legislation. And this was the last day to pay before a 10% penalty was calculated on outstanding taxes. To date, we've had 2 supplementary adjustments, and these were both on residential properties, and they were amounted to a very minor increase in municipal taxes collected. There were no we did not hold a tax sale in September, as there were no eligible properties, as all delinquent taxes were collected before the September due date. I wanted to mention so in terms of collection, as of July 4th, we had outstanding taxes receivable of just over $230,000. At the end of Q3, we actually were in a credit balance. So we've had more people prepaying their property taxes at this point. In comparison to the same quarter in 2021, there is a significant difference. So we've got people paying attention to their taxes and where they are, and our collections are doing quite well. I also wanted to mention that all tax requisitions from other government agencies like the regional and hospital district have been paid by their due dates. And we still have a remaining balance that we owe the school for school and police taxes. And those are due usually in early 2023. The province changed their reporting structure, and now we pay twice a year essentially. So that balance will be paid in early 2023 when we even out the homeowner grants and things like that. So in terms of payments in lieu of taxes or PILTs, as we call them, for federally owned properties, those are on track for 2022 as well. And there were no differences in assessment values in the federal government calculations compared to the BC assessment calculation. So we're happy with that. For cash flow, we're managing, we've got a strong cash flow process in place now that we need to manage the impacts from the wastewater treatment plant construction, which started in September. We're filing claims as quick as we can once the invoices have been paid. And but recognizing there is a timing between when the invoices are paid, the claims filed, and the subsequent reimbursement from the province. So right now we're in that time frame. And any time we need to supplement cash flow, we're drawing on a provincial advance that we received, which is currently invested in our Municipal Finance Association investment. Questions on that? So penalties and interest so far to date on current taxes, we've received, or we've calculated actually for $44,173 in comparison to 2021, where we received calculated over $64,000. Again, pointing to a higher collection. So where our penalty calculations are lower because our taxes outstanding are lower. On the arrears and delinquent taxes side, we've very minor calculation there. Again, though, it is lower than previous years. So those are all good news, I think. It reflects, the property owner's ability to pay and good cash flow positions. I'll go into the contingency allocations, and for the new councillors, as part of our operating budget process, we can anticipate the budgets are a point in time. And so to allow flexibility in our budgets, we actually have contingencies in the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. And this is the general fund contingency that was adopted by council, $180,000. And we allocate it for unforeseen expenditures. And for this, we've got some administrative costs related to human resource related expenses. We hired some staff. We've had some QP negotiations and reorganizational costs. For community services, we spent over or reallocated an additional $32,000 to that area of the budget, and that was for the TFN Kennedy Lake cleanup, zero carbon building certification, and then hiring and training expenses due to the reorganization. For infrastructure and public works, we allocated to date just a little under $17,000 related to additional office and administrative expenses, and then garbage collection and materials for a total of, I guess it doesn't show a total, but the remaining contingency balance of just a little under $82,000 there. We don't always anticipate this balance to be spent by year end, and I believe it would probably roll into surplus if the balance is not spent at year end. Moving on to water and sewer. So water's got a funded contingency of just a little over $30,000. To date, $23,526 has been allocated. And that is related to additional staffing resources, human water treatment expenses, and emergency pump repairs. So they've got a remaining balance there of just a little over $7,000. And then for the sewer fund, $67,423 was allocated for contingency. Just a minor spend there, a little under $4,000 related to some additional chemical required. And there's a balance, good, healthy balance there, nearly $64,000. The COVID Restart Grant was provided to all BC municipal governments, local governments, issued, I believe, in 2020. And there was a lot of flexibility in this particular grant for local governments in terms of spend. I mean, the most logical spend for this grant was, any additional PPE or other safety equipment to deal with the pandemic, of which I'm pretty sure that was spent in 2020 and 2021. For 2022, there was a balance, a budget of $248,493 budgeted to be spent. And the allocation there, between administration, majority going into community services of $164,000, and a big portion of that budget is for reservists, where we hire 2 additional reservists for the summer period, recognizing we've got an increase in tourism and more people in town. So we supplement our RSVP. Is that correct?
Just one extra.
Oh, okay. Apologize. One extra. Mayor Lawrence.
If we have a surplus in this, does that carry over to the next year? How does that work?
So we actually don't have a defined, to my understanding anyway, a defined end date for this grant. So we'll continue to carry it forward until it's spent. And one of the requirements of this grant is that we report it. It is unaudited on our financial statements, so you could see where the spending in our previous years in the audited financial statements. We're required to report that to the province. User fees and charges. We've provided some selected numbers here. And I want to remind council that the presentation here, we've got, so for user fees and charges are considered revenues for the local government. And for our presentations, they're shown in brackets. And that is actually a good thing. It's not, doesn't show as a negative, but it's just our presentation. So revenues are always shown in brackets and a cost or expenditures are usually shown, you know, as a positive number. So those are all revenue numbers. So for administration, we had a budget of a little over $256,000. To date, we've received over $300,000. And apologize, I do not know why. My apologies there.
For which one?
Administration, we've got a year-to-date actual of 301. I don't know if Laura Morehouse can, I don't have any notes. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So these are revenues here, which are often conservatively budgeted, so it's not unusual to sometimes see them over budget this time of year. I don't know what the small community investment fund amounts are showing in there. I don't believe so, because they wouldn't be within user fees and charges, but it's just a difficult amount to predict from year to year. It's largely dependent on bank account balances. If those are high, then we earn more interest income, for example. So administration usually sees a larger variance like that.
The parking, though, the $702,000 in terms of the budget and a year-to-date actual of 565, there's a timing difference there. So that's a reported balance as of the end of September. So we still have 3 more months to report into that budget. So we're anticipating that to exceed budget by year end. And I've got a bit more of a discussion in terms of the parking going into the budget discussion this afternoon. Community services. So for community programs, we've currently got a budget of over $330,000 year to date, or to September 30th, $162,000. And that's primarily made up of Philomene fees, although we've got some lower program fees in the recreation areas, and reduced hours and enrollment for the children's center. So I don't know. Okay, that sounds good. I apologize. Protective services. Those fees are broken up between bylaw and fire, and the bylaw would entail any bylaw enforcement revenues, dog fines, I suppose, would be in there. We've got business licenses in there. I'm going to move on from these. The infrastructure and public works, I'll go quickly into the water and sewer. Just to note, we for water, we've got a budget of over $900,000, but year to date to September 30th of just over $785,000. We're still awaiting Q4 water's charges. So we anticipate that to be over budget by year end, or will exceed our budgeted revenues. The same with sewer. Again, that reflects only 3/4 of billings, and we'll have one that we administer early in 2023.
Just have a quick note. The typo of your the audio is over our. Is that going to happen every time? Because that's going to really be annoying.
It's a factory setting through the mayor that we've provided for the hearing impaired.
I understand that.
Meeting. So if we take it off here, it won't be in the recording.
No, I understand that. Is there any way that we can actually see the number?
You just shrink the size of the box on the
table.
Yeah.
Like in the live PowerPoint.
You could edit in this slideshow mode.
No, it's hard for us to know where it's going to show up,
Okay.
but we could read it out.
However, I will make a note of this in our PowerPoint.
I can-
We should not have text below a certain amount for future presentations. So moving forward, I know that we can amend the PowerPoint template so this doesn't happen again.
Just for financials, if you could.
Yeah, it's really good. So the total is estimated at 3.759. For the year, and so year to date, you can see there, 3.2 million.
Perfect, thank you.
This particular slide, the box is probably one of the largest, and we shouldn't encounter this in the remaining presentation. But if we do, we'll.
That's okay, a little readout is fine, as long as we get.
So that concludes a high-level look at some of the revenues and expenditures for the district. And now I'm going to move into with the corporate services project. We've got two projects under this area. The first one is the modular office space for Municipal Hall. Originally, it was planned to actually acquire an additional office space via a modular office trailer and position it somewhere, I believe, outside this building. For reasons we're not doing that, and we actually are moving it, or we've moved it into Public Works yard, and that is being set up as we speak. Staff are expected to move in as soon as we can get the electrical and the internet functionality of that trailer ready. So that's in progress. And then council chambers and office space upgrades. In 2022, we had an $80,000 budget, which is being funded from a municipal buildings reserve. That budget is increased. We're still finalizing construction estimates and determining funding sources and able to offset the additional costs for this space. So we're looking to expand or to utilize the space for office and council chambers. As we're moving back into in-person meetings, we're increasing the capacity and gallery of council meetings for public attendance, requiring a larger space in tandem with office spaces needing more space to work and meet. That is all for me. Whoops. Apologize. Community services.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I will be presenting the Q3 updates for community programs. So the first one up is the Community Hall foyer upgrades. So this has been a project that is completed, although I will note that we are still expecting one more expense to be added into the expenses to date. So we budgeted for $4,500 and will probably be not much beyond $3,200 for this project. So this saw the addition of a seating area at the hall, cubbies for backpacks and shoe racks, and then a workspace for staff to use while there and use as a check-in desk. So that's been well received. The community hall upgrades. So this is a project that's made at just over $100,000. And we had estimated $30,000 for this year in the budget. However, we are deferring this as the project is pending BC Hydro grid upgrades. So those are scheduled to be completed by the end of 2023. Next, we have the school gym equipment. So total budget amount is $5,000, and that was over the course of 5 years. And so for this year, for 2022, that's $1,000. And this is currently in progress. This is to help support the after-school access for community members to the Wickham-Minster Community School. So I did get an update late last night from the Wickham-Minster Community School Society, and they will be purchasing equipment that is for the basketball program as well as the pickleball, which seem to be the most popular programs currently. And lastly, I have the community recreation facility. So this is over $7,445,000 estimated, and current 2022 budget amount at $125,000. This is in progress, and I will likely be deferring to the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, Mr. Aaron Rogers, to continue on this conversation in the budget presentations later this afternoon. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Peter Thick will be presenting this section and he'll be here in just a moment.
Morning, Council. That was fast for me.
Zipping along.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the planning projects that have been underway, and I think there's the emergency planning projects as well that are kind of under the same umbrella. So the first project that's been under consideration is the mobile population census. This one ran into a couple snags. Largely, the district, had essentially committed $10,000 of taxpayer money towards that. The other $25,000 that were proposed in the budget were going to be coming from community partners. There was some issues with the contracts that were negotiated with the service providers, and the other community partners didn't quite have the time to engage in the way that we thought they were going to, and decided that they didn't want to be part of the project this year. So the budget's been significantly reduced. And since that time, I've mostly been working with actually a different service provider to try to get some information for a significantly reduced budget to try to kind of fulfill this project, at least in the way that the District of Tofino would like to use it. Really, the purpose of the project is for us to better understand the actual population of this community, and that helps a lot in land use planning as well as infrastructure planning activities. We have, around 2,000 people measured by the census, but there's a significant what we call shadow population. These are people that are either not caught by the census or are transient workers who maybe live here for 6 to 8 months a year. And then it's also kind of interesting for us to know how many visitors are actually coming through and how that impacts our infrastructure in particular. So the way we're kind of going about trying to get that information is currently working with TELUS Mobile. It's actually really fascinating, some of the scary stuff, but they can actually track people's cell phones, where they are, and by aggregating cell phone data where people are, where they're not, they can kind of get an understanding of who actually lives here, who's only here for a few days, who might be here just every day, who's here for maybe 6 to 10 months, those kinds of things. So we're trying to break out our general population here in Tofino and get a bit of a better understanding of what's actually going on, so we can hopefully use that to influence infrastructure and land use planning decisions moving forward. So this one is in progress. We hit a little bit of a snag in terms of our partnerships with community partners, but we're moving forward with a different service provider and a bit of a lowered kind of final deliverables, and hopefully wrapping that up in the next 6 weeks or so. Yeah, just kind of in contract negotiations right now. This project has been a large one that's been happening behind the scenes. This is a kind of a redo of our development approvals framework. It was funded by a large grant from UBCM. It's in progress and expected to kind of be wrapping up early in the new year. Maybe it'll be a few more months of work. Planning staff, as well as our Director of Infrastructure and Public Works, have been quite involved with this. We meet with the consultants. Urban Systems was awarded the contract quite regularly. The general goal of this project is to really streamline our approvals process. There are many kind of sort of techniques and approaches that we use that are a little bit archaic here. The district, we have a completely paper-based system. A lot of our tracking and things like that is not very efficient. And so the goal with this is to create a new bylaw and a general framework, as well as public-facing documents that make things a lot more simple and straightforward for both staff and applicants and council when we're considering applications, and hopefully, improve our level of service and reduce unnecessary waste of time that occasionally happens, and frustration associated with it that occasionally happens when we're considering various development applications. The zoning bylaw update. This is something that's been in the works for well before I came to the district, and it's generally seen as a good idea. The zoning bylaw that we use is close to 25 years old now. It was initially adopted in 1997, so it's some of the language and zones and land uses in there are a little bit outdated at this point. particularly since we've recently adopted a new OCP that has some fairly strong directions for the community. One of the kind of appropriate things to do at that point would be to update our zoning bylaw to reflect what we've said in our OCP. So this was something that was initially going to be started this year. It's been deferred until next year, largely due to resource limitations, organizational restructuring, those kinds of things. We're hoping to begin early in 2023. This is going to be a very kind of consultation heavy activity. There'll be numerous reports coming to council. We'll probably start with something like maybe not, I guess we call it a permission to proceed report. That'll probably come to the committee of the whole. That is going to, in early 2023, that'll sort of lay out our proposed process for this and the various engagement opportunities and a rough timeline for council's review. And then we'll see how we move forward from there. And now we're into emergency plans. So I'm just going to preface this by saying that our emergency planning coordinator had to go be with his wife's family for a bit of a family emergency. And so I can speak at least at a surface level about all these projects, but if there are very specific questions, I may have to defer them until our emergency planning coordinator is back in town so I can actually ask him the specifics of a few things. So our vertical evacuation structures is a very actually kind of fascinating project. This is something that's been talked about in the works for a while. Essentially, for those of you who don't know, it's the possibility that the district could access funding to create a very large tower, essentially, to set back from Chesterton's Beach, which would provide a useful and needed emergency evacuation point for a lot of the South Tofino area, particularly everyone who lives around Chesterton's Beach and those areas. Right now, it's quite difficult for them to reach high ground in the appropriate amount of time should we have a major tsunami event. So this is basically a large tower that they could climb up to that is designed to withstand significant tsunami events in that area. At the very first meeting of this council, I believe Mr. Orchiston came forward and asked for a resolution in support of a grant. So this is an in-progress project where Keith is working on various grant funding opportunities and working with some private donors as well to better understand the actual feasibility of the project and the selected site, which is a piece of parkland that the district owns. Sort of in the middle Chester, well, I guess it's off North Chesterton, just the Soulwood. And the community recovery framework. So this is a project that's been deferred largely due to provincial legislation changes. So this is a essentially framework. It's a document that'll help the district align community recovery efforts with provincial legislation. Provincial legislation is in the process of being updated. Staff understand that the final updates are expected to be rolled out in the spring of 2023. These changes to provincial legislation will affect the final outcome of this project. And so the project is scheduled to begin essentially shortly after these updates are released, which will probably be later spring 2023. And Tsunami Siren 4, as of now, this has actually been completed, but as of September 2022, it was still in progress. Keith had a few bugs to work out. So this one is a project that has been completed. This is another project, the West Coast Probabilistic Earthquake and Tsunami Risk Assessment. It was a large grant that was acquired that basically allowed the district to hire consultants to go out and do a lot of geotechnical studies and even bathymetry studies around the entire Essequibo Peninsula to kind of help us refine our understanding of earthquake risks and actual tsunami inundation risks. This is one that is, again, close to completion. I'm not sure exactly where Keith is. I think he's working out some final details with consultants, but a large portion of the work has been completed and the final details will go towards further land use planning as well as emergency planning objectives. And I believe that's all for me. So if there are no questions, I'll pass over to Pete Baker.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Okay, so we're just going to go through protective services now. Just a bit of an update on where we are with bylaw notices comparison over the last few years. When we look at revenue to date, or well, to the end of September, we can see that the numbers are significantly lower for 2022 compared to 2023. When it comes to bylaw notices, a lot of it depends on the types of infractions that are being handed out. So just as a quick reference for probably one of the biggest reasons for the big jump there or decrease of August of 2021, we had 53 tickets paid for vehicles used for camping, which is $160 per ticket. August of 2022, there was only 7 of those tickets. So we actually had about 300 less of those tickets issued this year. So situations like that will indicate that big decrease in the revenue there. Lots of tickets being paid through those months, but they tend to be the smaller amount, so that can make the big difference there. So, but throughout the course of the year, that was a significant decline in the number of vehicles used for camping. So big. Through business licensing, this is one that we continue to see grow. 724 licenses issued as of the end of September. And then it increases in the fees for that as well. And so this amount does include new licenses and the application fees in there as well, or licenses issued as well as the application fees also.
We generate, I apologize to the chair. We generally collect those in the beginning of the year, generally.
They are ongoing throughout the year. We have some that we takes a better portion of a year to actually catch up with them and have them pay their fees. But also some businesses are just starting out. So we'll have new businesses throughout the year. Even just prior to November, there's still some new businesses starting up for the year. And so they're paying the 2021 fees and then, or 2022 fees, and then getting to the 2023 fees very quickly. So as for the projects with the bylaw department, we had uniforms and rebranding for just over $4,000. Most of this has been completed, but having the new staff and with the new logos implemented last year, that meant all the new uniforms need to have new logos and patches created. So that's what part of that was. And the only remaining portion to that is the higher quality, high visibility rainwear, which is on order right now and should be completed soon, depending on supply chain issues. Bylaw utility vehicle. So this was the Polaris Ranger. So that has been completed now as well. It's been in use for about a month now. It's getting tucked away for the better part of the winter. The remainder of the expenses in that one is for the insurance fees and those sorts of pieces over the 5-year financial plan. We'll move into the fire department now. So training and incident indemnity. So this is the amount of money that's getting paid out from the municipality to the fire department for showing up for calls and practices. So we do break that down between training nights and calls specific. So it definitely has been increasing over the last few years, this being one of our busiest years on record. Important to note, the big jump in this year was that council had approved the on-call stipends for an officer and engineer through 21 weekends of the year, which was all summer weekends between June 15th and I believe September 15th, and any holiday weekends outside of that period as well. So that's where we see the significant jump. Yeah, just training nights alone, 14,000, and then the incident callouts being 54. And then for projects with the fire department, training and equipment storage. So this was the extrication dummy that we did purchase. That's been around for a while and has been used many times and loaned out some other areas in the community for their use as well. And then the hose line extinguisher training prop, that one has been ordered and we're just waiting on delivery sometime in the next couple of weeks for that one also. Our fire suppression and rescue equipment. This was some of the auto extrication equipment, so hydraulic pumps all been purchased. And then we're looking at some more competitive pricing for the electric fans and lifting bags, because many of the items have all gone up drastically in price since the time the budget was approved last year and the time where we were getting the quotes at that point. So we're just seeing where we can get the best value before completing that one. And then retired equipment replacement, this one and storage racks. So this was for all of our helmets and balaclavas, all that has been purchased. Storage racks all just arrived last week and were put together and installed just on Tuesday night. So that one's now completed as well. And now we're back on to Espremont for community services.
Thank you, Chief Baker. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So the 2022 seasonal shuttle service, the summer service is obviously fully complete now. This is funded almost entirely by RMI, but also with a small contribution of $5,000 from Tourism Tofino annually. The expenses to date are lower than what was budgeted because we had hoped to, we continue to hope to offer the service somewhat into the shoulder summer season, if you will, into the mid-June to mid-September, but due to challenges securing drivers, we have been unable to do that for the past couple of years, which has resulted in lower cost, but also lower ridership. So here's a look at the most recent years. The service has operated since 2008, has been free since 2014. We're just showing 5 years here. We did take a pause in 2020 due to COVID, and we have seen a significant decrease in ridership following COVID. Again, in 2018 and 2019, we were able to offer an additional 3 to 4 weeks of service. So that also contributes to the higher numbers that we're seeing here. This is the second year we've operated with an electric bus as our primary vehicle, which has been very successful, well received. We're nominated for a clean energy grant as well, which we did not win, but it's nice to be nominated, just the same. And this year we added signage inside the bus. So similar to what you would see in an urban setting, signage inside the bus, not advertising, but things, district messaging, community messaging around how to beach responsibly, fire bans, that type of thing. So we worked with Tourism Tofino to assist with the design of that. Village Green Court improvements. So this project was originally just to improve the pedestrian access, and replace some fencing, basketball hoops, that type of thing. As we got into the assessment of the court condition, this has turned into a larger project. So staff will be speaking to this later on in the presentation. Currently, we have a preliminary design complete, and those are the expenses you see there, but we have not started any construction because the project is a little more involved than initially thought to be. The MUP redevelopment and sustainable transportation node. This was funded largely by a tourism dependent communities grant, a portion of RMI, some CNI levy. We may or may not need to access that based on the final project cost. So this is as of September 30th. The project was substantially complete at that time. It is since almost complete. We have a couple of finishing touches to sort out a waste bin and some challenging wave delineators that have been problematic, but we think we're close to a solution. And this project will be completed within budget. MUP rehab, so we continue to aggressively redevelop the multi-use path. This is the section that was completed this year from Hotel Z halfway to Tree Frog Lane, it should say. We will be proposing to do the second half in 2023. So this project does not show any expenses to date. It is currently complete now in Q4, but at that time, September 30th, we were not fully complete. And that has also been completed within budget. Tofino Theater venue improvements. This is an amount of RMI that the district would contribute to improvements at the Colquitt Sound Community Theater to complement their upgrades, as this is a venue that visitors do engage with for live performances, movies, that type of thing. The project has not moved ahead yet, so those funds have not yet been spent. Cox Bay Maltby washrooms. So this project was originally budgeted for 2022 2021 at a lower project cost. Construction cost, as most of us know, have been extraordinarily high for the last couple of years. We were working towards a project at an increased cost, the budget of $780,000. But due to organizational changes, we just didn't have the staff resources to really tackle this project in the way that it needed to be. So this will be deferred to 2023. And cycling racks, this was started in 2022 or 2021 and carried over to 2023. And this was to install covered bike parking at some of our beaches. And we have successfully installed covered bike parking at North Chesterman, Cox Bay, and Hellison Drive. And this project did come in $710 over budget. And I'm going to pass it over to Director of Infrastructure and Public Works if there are no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, council. I'm going to walk you through a number of slides this morning, more to follow this afternoon. So we're going to start with the Public Works Department. We have a number of projects that I'm going to present today that have been deferred. Most of it's going to be based on our staffing resources. In 2022 was a challenging year for hiring people and maintaining people and illnesses. So some of these projects, many of these projects are deferred, and then council will be able to review what staff are proposing for 2023 to 2027 this afternoon. So the sidewalk improvement project is intended to develop sidewalks in Tofino. This project has been deferred. The project is under review, and we plan to coordinate sidewalk replacement with other projects that we're doing. So it's just one of the ones we just had to move forward a year and then think about it in terms of our future planning. Oh my goodness.
Extra quick.
No, it's really fast.
It's getting faster and faster.
I might be able to talk that fast. The asset management program expenses to date as of September 30th. There weren't any charges there. We're working towards staffing the program in 2022. So we're currently in the process of interviews starting tomorrow and next week. And as I indicated to council yesterday, we've applied for a grant. This program will be reviewed if we're successful in the grant, and also as we bring on our staff and we start fine tuning the program. Climate action planning. We completed a climate resilience summary earlier this year and brought that in on budget. The future pieces of the climate plan will be pushed forward at least a year as we sort of start to reorient ourselves around asset management as well. There is a $25,000 per year cost for installing EV chargers. I don't have a plan to look to develop this, so we've deferred this as well another year until we can figure out where these are going to go and who's putting them in. Cyclists and pedestrians safety upgrades. Similarly to the previous slides, we haven't spent these funds as of September 30th and are unlikely to spend them before the end of the year. Culvert and drainage replacements. Similarly, we have $40,000 a year over 5 years to upgrade culvert and drainage replacements. Funds are there if we have an issue, but at this point, this point of the year, we hadn't spent any of the $40,000, a minimal amount of $40,000 in 2022. Fleet replacement. This is one that we actually did accomplish. We managed to replace a significant amount of our fleet, and I think our crew are pretty happy with that. Moving forward into 2023 and further, we're going to be looking at the whole program and trying to get into a more sustainable fleet replacement program, potentially working with outside consultant to help us reduce costs. That's something I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon. The Lynn Road and Chesterman Beach Road design, the initial concept is complete. It came in at $49,000, and so we came in a little bit under budget. The next steps for this would be prioritizing this road and this drainage system if we wanted, would involve developing detailed designs. This is not even a Class D estimate. This is a basically conceptual idea of what Lynn Road might want to look like. It comes with a significant price tag even at this very early stage. So it's something again for council will be considering over the upcoming years and looking at different priorities that we have. Modular office space. So we now have 2 ATCO trailers. We have one that Simon's currently working out of that we discussed yesterday, And then there's the new one that we just was brought into the yard about 2 weeks ago and receives power next week. That'll be for the bylaw department. So that project is completed for the first one anyways. I'll stop there. I spoke fast. There's a lot of public works. Does anybody have any questions? This is great. Water. The district water master plan, I think we talked about this yesterday. So we issued a request for proposals and that proposal call closes in December or potentially early January. Up to date, as of June of September 30th, we hadn't had any expenses yet. Water main project design upgrades. Look, we completed this one. We completed the Class A designs for 4th Street and Neil Street replacements. So that would be the on Neil Street from 3rd to 2nd and 4th Street from Gibson to Campbell. So the designs of those are complete. The next step would be construction replacement of the existing main. We're deferred. There was also a budget for our net street design. We're deferring that until we're ready to think about our net as well. Remote water monitoring and telemetry upgrades. This one has been deferred. We'll be discussing it this afternoon. This project involves installing technology, cameras, internet at Mears Island, so we can monitor our water on a daily or hourly basis. This project is important to us, and I'm disappointed we couldn't get it done this year. But again, it was a bit chaotic at Public Works and Infrastructure this year with staff coming and going. So this one will definitely be on the books for next year. The DCC technical report, we had not started that as of September 30th. We are in progress in the sense that this report will come back, or a water portion of this report will come back to us through the Water Master Plan RFP. The DL-117 Reservoir Rechlorination Station, we discussed this yesterday in our tour. This would be the development of a rechlorination station at District Lot 117 to ensure that we have the chlorine residuals that we're required to have by legislation. This project wasn't completed in DL-117 partly due to resources, but partly because it was underfunded. And so we're rescoping the project and exploring an alternative solution. So what we're exploring, just for interest's sake, is that the water goes up to DL-117, it sits up there for a long, long time and it loses its chlorine. And so we're looking at rechlorinating. The other option may be actually the wastewater treatment plant's going to need a fair amount of water for cleaning. And so we think that the use of that water by the wastewater treatment plant may keep that water turning over and then allow us and then that would mean we wouldn't have to do this. So we're going to push this project back a year or two and just monitor our residuals until then. So again, I will discuss it. We'll be on the slides this afternoon as well. Okay, water.
Sewer.
Oh, it's about water. Sorry, water questions. Does anybody have any questions about water before I get into sewer?
I think the questions might come this afternoon.
Right. Yeah, nice long one. We are, as we discussed yesterday, we're systematically replacing our lift station generator replacements. As of September 30th, we hadn't expensed any of those. It's been a bit awkward because we have about a year lag on ordering or even longer. And so council can expect this afternoon, but probably more likely in January for staff to come back with a very accurate idea of which generators are in place and when. It's gotten a bit confusing because we're going to be getting new generators in some of our stations from the wastewater treatment plant. We may be able to switch out stuff. So that's something that council can expect staff to come back with a very clear plan in January.
I get a question for you.
Sure.
What happens to the old generators?
If there's, I've never been in Public Works where we received an old generator, but my assumption is if there's a life left in that generator, that we would put it up for auction or whatever other process we have to move on from district infrastructure. Nyla, selling generators.
Yeah, so if they have value at the end of their life, and we have the purchasing and disposition of assets policy state that if the value is over, I believe exceeding $1,000, then it has to be offered publicly. If we do have to dispose of that, there's new standards coming in that require us to have a look at what our retirement level obligations would be if we have an environmental impact or a cost of disposition. So we'll be having more conversations with council about that over the next year or so.
Our infiltration study and repairs program, that's a program where we would be assessing for what type and how much water is getting into our sewer system. This has been deferred, but this will be something that Simon will most likely be picking up in the new year and likely discussing this afternoon. Twinning of the force main from Maltby Lynn Road, we spent $300 up to September 30th. That was most likely a phone call to our engineers to start discussing future design work on this program. So this is a project that's being combined into 3 projects that we'll be discussing this afternoon. Updated pricing. The list, similarly, lift station number 7, that was the one we drove by yesterday on Lynn Road. That would be part of this larger twinning of force main discussion. We did not spend any money on it in 2022 so far. And ditto for lift station 13. This is the Maltby upgrade. This will form part of that larger force main project. Wastewater treatment plant. It's in progress. We're moving forward. Expenses to date by the end of September, it was almost $10 million, and we're continuing to spend in the month since. And that's it for the whole slide deck, I believe. Does anybody have any questions about sewer, water, or public works? Great. Well, thank you for.
It'll take some time for us to change gears and move into the budget presentation. So I'd like to respectfully request a short recess in about 5 minutes to do so.
Let's have a 5-minute recess. Okay, we're reconvening.
Guess I was waiting for the screen to change. So welcome back. This is our next session is on the 2023 to 2027 budget. And this is the introduction to our financial plan for the next 5 years. We will be focusing primarily on projects or capital portions of the budget. And we don't have everything tied down. So some of the revenues or the funding sources that you'll see will actually say to be determined. And so we're giving an overview to council at this point for your input and feedback, and as we go into the more detailed process, which will be in early February of 2023. And we'll get to that, the next steps at the very end of the presentation. Yes, Councillor.
Just where, can I just ask maybe our CEO just to do a quick outline of how this dovetails with the new council strategic planning process?
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship. So this is coming in advance of council strategic planning session. So we do have an adopted 2022 to 2026 financial plan that's in place and gives us the mandate to continue operating the municipality and continue on with any plans and projects that are sort of in stream and continuing on from one year to the next. So when we have a look at this next financial plan in particular, we have to do that very carefully because we know that it is a new council term, and council will be going through strategic planning before the financial plan is adopted, but quite close to the adoption date of the financial plan. So there shouldn't be anything in here that is out of line with the current strategic plan in place, and that is largely out of line with the current financial plan. So if council is seeing anything today that they'd like to sort of set aside and talk about later, and perhaps through strategic planning, there's certainly an opportunity to do that. This is a very preliminary introductory look at the projects that staff have planned over the next 5 years. And this is an opportunity for council to comment about on how they feel about the inclusion of those projects or plans, but we're certainly not seeking any direction today or decision making today about what the plan should look like. There'll be lots of time to continue the discussions.
Thank you.
So I am going to pass over the baton to Laura Morehouse. She is remote from PEI, actually. She's our manager of financial services. And she has graciously come back from mat leave on a part-time basis to help us with the budget, and I'm forever grateful for Laura. So take it away, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Nikki, I just need to have some permissions to share my screen, please.
As a panelist, you should already have that ability if you're not right now.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. Oh, yes, it's just not letting me turn my video on. That's okay, though. Okay, how's that? Can you see the title slide there?
We can.
Excellent. Good morning, Mayor and Council. As Deborah mentioned, and for those of you who I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Laura Morehouse, and I'm the Manager of Financial Services. The last time I was meeting with you was the first budget meeting for the 2022 financial plan, so we've come full circle here, and I'm happy to be back to be part of the discussion here with you today. So as Deborah mentioned, this is really going to be a high level discussion today. We do have a lot of information to go through, and there's going to be lots of opportunities to stop and ask questions. We are going to talk a little bit about the financial planning process here at the District of Tofino. I'll talk to you a little bit about our public engagement process as well before I hand it back over to Deborah for the financial officer's report. We'll then move into the division and departmental project presentations and then conclude with the next steps to lead us through to the next budget meeting. So before we dive in, I just wanted to quickly review the documents that you received earlier this week in the agenda package. So you received the 2023 to 2027 draft project sheets, and that's a compilation of all of the individual project sheets submitted by the directors. And those really outline the nuts and bolts of all of the different projects. So project timelines, budget amounts over the next 5 years, and project descriptions. And you've also received the 2023 to 2027 draft project listing by funding source. So this is a big document. It's a project listing, a compilation of all of the projects with their funding sources for each year of the proposed project timeline. So municipalities provide residents with essential services, clean water, sewer systems, parks, recreation, bylaw services, and financial planning really is a tool to enhance the accountability and service delivery of the municipality. The financial plan sets out the legal expenditure authority, so how much money and how we can spend it throughout each year of the financial plan. And we are regulated by legislation that has been established for specific requirements and deadlines for the adoption of the financial plan. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move through the presentation. This graphic here shows the general cyclical nature of the financial planning process. We're here in the second phase, so to speak, budget presentations and public engagement. And this usually starts sometime in the fall and moves through till the spring. Following this, we'll move into balancing the budget and developing the tax rates, and then finalizing the financial plan and the tax rates bylaws, which need to be adopted by May 15th. We typically present 2 quarterly progress reports throughout the year, Q2, and as we presented earlier today, Q3. But really the budget process starts early in the year, and there are a couple of things that we've done to get us through to this point in terms of budget development. So templates are distributed through to directors and managers in early June, and both the operating budgets and project budget sheets were due in September. And then financial services takes all of that information and starts compiling it into the succinct financial plan. Earlier in November, the directors met to review all of the various projects and see if there's anywhere where we can align projects, cost saving, move things together. And that's what we'll be presenting today. And then that brings us to today, our first special budget meeting. We typically set our second meeting for sometime in the new year. So more information to come on that in terms of a date. District staff consider many different things while preparing their proposed projects and operating budget. So we take into account the actual spending in the past year and any required adjustments within the operating budget, changes in scope or cost estimates for previously approved projects, and any new equipment or projects that will require funding, and then any potential new resource requirements as well. So lots of different factors coming into play when we're preparing the financial plan. Additionally, we just spoke about the strategic plan, but there are several guiding documents that we use to make decisions in terms of prioritizing projects. And again, that's the strategic plan. We look to the official community plan, the various condition assessments, and any strategic or master plans that exist within the various departments. So when it comes to public engagement, the District of Tofino's communication strategy outlines these 4 objectives that specifically relate to the financial plan. And throughout our engagement process and any additional communications related activities, we hope to meet these objectives. So they include increasing confidence in responsible district management of tax dollars, increased awareness about how tax dollars are allocated, generating participation in the financial planning process, and supporting responsiveness to mitigate concerns and address issues. So prior to adopting the financial plan, local governments are required by legislation to undergo public consultation and engagement. And this is really a great opportunity for the community to learn about the planning process, review proposed projects and expenditures, and to submit comments and ask questions to mayor and council and to staff. Historically, the District of Tofino has had two separate and distinct consultation periods, one in the fall and one in the early new year. But now with the implementation of our online engagement tool, which is Talk Tofino, we have the opportunity to engage with the community throughout the duration of the planning process, and we can update content on that site as we reach specific milestones. In 2022, we held a virtual town hall, and that was due to the ongoing pandemic restrictions, but we are looking forward to having an in-person event in 2023, and more information regarding this event will be made available in the new year. And this is a really valuable opportunity for mayor and council and staff to engage one-on-one with the public and answer any questions and comments related to the proposed budget. So the Talk Tofino budget engagement site is currently live. It went up earlier in November, and these are some of the key features of the engagement site. So there's an option for community members to subscribe to updates, so get notifications as new information is posted on the site. There's lots of frequently asked questions available there, general financial information, specific questions regarding financial planning, and later on, information about BC assessment will be provided. The financial planning timeline is available there to see, and we provide links to meeting agendas and relevant financial plan documents. So at the end of this meeting, likely tomorrow, the presentation slides from today's meeting will be uploaded to Talk Tofino, as well as the videos of the special budget meetings. There's also a question and answer forum, and this is something kind of new to us. It's regularly monitored, and the response time is generally going to be between 48 and 72 hours, but it's an opportunity for members of the public or anyone who's registered to Talk Tofino to ask specific questions in a forum type environment, and we can provide the answers right on Talk Tofino. And we don't have anything set up yet, but we do have the option to include quick polls and surveys. So that would be if there's specific questions or input that we're wanting from the community regarding a specific project. We can always include that at any point. So in addition to Talk Tofino and our in-person event, there are some additional engagement opportunities. So the public has an opportunity to be part of the public comment and question periods in these special budget meetings. Questions can be emailed to budget@tofino.ca. That's an email that is regularly monitored by financial services staff. There's opportunities to engage on social media. And then we will be sending out a letter, so to speak, with engagement information in the new year with the utility bills. And this really will outline all of the engagement opportunities that we've discussed today. And there'll be a space on there as well for written feedback, and that can be dropped off or mailed to the municipal office. So I'll stop sharing my screen here and take some time if there's any questions or comments, and that will give Nikki and Deborah a moment to set the screen up again for the financial officer's report.
Questions? Seeing none.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. So I'm going to be discussing next the piece that I mentioned in our orientation to council a few weeks back. So this is on the financial planning process and our accountability.
Apologies, I think the clicker was touched when I was just setting it up.
Sorry that I did that. I apologize.
It does look like a little mouse, that's all. 1 second here, I'm gonna find your PowerPoint. We may have to go to the specific slide.
Oh, I don't have those slides. Oh, I can advance. Okay.
Okay, so we'll just start here 1 second. I'm just gonna share the screen in presentation mode. Okay.
So this was Laura's piece. All right. So I'm going to be walking you through the financial planning and accountability, any relevant financial policies and updates to those policies. Walk you through what we're looking at in terms of 2023 taxation. And then finally, next steps in the process following the departmental presentation. So financial planning and accountability under section 165 of the community charter, a municipality must have a financial plan that is adopted annually by bylaw before the annual property tax bylaw can be adopted. We can amend that bylaw at any time for items that we have that have come up that we couldn't anticipate at the time, or that would be significant enough that would distort, I guess, the results and the actual and the budget results. So it makes sense to amend those bylaws for any significant values. We have this plan is for a 5-year planning period, and the plan period is 5 years, and the period being the year in which the plan is specified to come into force, and then the following 4 years. The financial plan must present and separate out amounts for proposed expenditures. These amounts to separate out include interest and principal on municipal debt, the amount required for capital purposes, and the amounts required to offset a deficiency in a previous year. So if, in fact, as you recall, I mentioned, we cannot present a plan that is either a surplus or a deficit position, it must be balanced. But if in fact for actual, so if 22 say resulted in a deficit position where we actually had excess expenditures over revenues, that would be considered a deficit in that previous year, and we would need to identify that very clearly in the next financial plan is how we're going to offset that deficit. What revenue sources we're going to offset that. So that's what that means. And then any other amounts for municipal purposes, so other operating expenditures. We must also identify proposed funding sources. And of course, the most recognized funding source is property value tax. We can also have parcel taxes, revenues from fees and charges, which we saw a little bit of earlier in the presentation. Revenues from other sources, grants, for instance, another funding source, and proceeds from borrowing. This year, we will see those proceeds from borrowing are likely for the wastewater treatment plant. I mentioned that the financial plan must be balanced, and we must, as Laura talked about, the public consultation. So we must undertake a process of public consultation before adoption. And this will likely be held in February or early March in a format similar to prior years, but in person, as Laura mentioned, and separated possibly into major programs. So how residents have an opportunity to discuss, go to various staff in the room and talk with them about specifics about that budget. Audited financial statements. So our next, this accountability is under section 171 of the community charter, where we must have audited financial statements annually performed. And the municipal auditor must report to council on the annual statement. The district is in year 2 of a 5-year agreement with our auditor, MMP, Myers, Norris, Penny, I believe they're still called MMP. As they are our municipal auditor. We've just completed our interim audit, actually in November, sorry, get lost here. That was our interim financial audit, and our full year audit will be completed in March of 2023. Statements must be prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting standards. Local governments, generally accepted accounting standards for local governments, which are established by the Public Sector Accounting Board. And you'll see the PSAP acronym a lot over the policy. We have a lot of standards that we must adopt and implement and then adopt into our financial statements and into our accounting operations. This year coming up, we have what's called a CAS, Canadian Accounting Standards, Canadian Auditing Standards 315, which is a new standard where the auditors focus on entity level internal controls as well as IT controls, which is very new to local government, but has been out there in terms of public or private enterprises for a long time. Local government's just getting caught up in terms of the scrutiny that's being placed on the data that the auditors are always relying on to be accurate and integrity. So those additional review of those entity level and IT controls will be performed in the 2022 audit, of which it's more of a checklist as I understand it. It's not going to be a pass-fail type of thing, but the auditors will help to point out any weaknesses, if you will, that they see, and they will report that document to not only to us, but to council as well. Those audited financial statements must be submitted to the provincial inspector by May 15th of each year. And we anticipate that report to be presented to council in early May for acceptance. Financial policies and updates. Asset retirement obligations. I think Anila kind of touched on this a little earlier when the generator question came up. Asset retirement is a PSAB, so the public sector accounting standard that needs to be implemented in within our 2023 fiscal year. So our fiscal year again starts from January and ends in December, so it's a calendar year. We've currently got a draft policy. So sorry, back up. This particular section of PSAB is 3280, applicable to fiscal years beginning April 1st of 2022. So it impacts our 2023 fiscal year. We have a legal obligation associated with retirement of tangible capital assets. And those include any decommissioning or dismantling. We need to measure and report on any remediation of contamination. We need to document our post-retirement activities. And we need, if applicable, would need to construct any other tangible capital assets to perform those post-retirement activities. So we need to identify any assets that might fall under this criteria. For instance, our wharf would likely be an asset that would fall under this asset retirement obligation policy. So we would measure and determine what that value is for this obligation. I'm going to have our auditor, MMP, come in and talk to council about what that will mean to council, and we'll gain a better understanding and anticipation of an RF. I'll be issuing an RFP to help support the measurement process. So our next steps in this particular policy will be to determine what stakeholders need to be involved in the process. Continue on with any policy development, identification of the applicable tangible capital assets. Inventory those. We need to measure the liability. And then in our 2023, we will be reporting on what those look like in our financial statements and develop the 2022 comparatives. Again, the auditor will be presenting to council this information and guidance prior to the issuance of an RFP. Reserve fund bylaw establishment. So the paid parking service area reported a surplus of just over $111,000 in 2021. We don't have a project sheet for the paid parking in this presentation, but we will in the following meetings in the operating budget. We will be revisiting this reserve with council at a future committee of the whole meeting to set priorities on for the allocation of any current and future surplus. So establishment of a reserve fund policy will enable council to allocate any surpluses in a transparent and appropriate way. The policy document will establish minimum reserve levels. It will allocate in all surpluses in specific areas to reserves and allocate a portion of or percentage up to a certain value to those reserves. The bylaw, so the following bylaws will prescribe the authorization or how to use those funds and the funds that would contributing to increasing those reserves. So we'll see how we would dictate, the bylaw would prescribe how to use the reserve and how to increase the reserve. I remind you that I provided you with a list of all of the general water and sewer funds reserve. That was the Schedule 1 in your audited financial statement package that we discussed in the orientation. (2023) taxation. We're going to be continuing discussions on shifting taxes from residential to commercial. For 2022, the residential class held 83% of the taxable value in Tofino, while the commercial class held approximately 16%. At the August 2015-2022 Committee of the Whole, BC Assessment presented council with some really good information and discussion was had. Over the past 5 years, commercial values have remained relatively constant, except for 2020, where we saw the impact of the pandemic. And the commercial market changed in 2020. We saw a decrease in the market values of nearly 6%. Revenues for Tofino businesses have significantly decreased in 2020. But we started to see a rebound in 2022 and expecting a full recovery to pre-pandemic revenue levels in 2023. Other economic indicators that are supporting that hopeful or that recovery is our MRDT tax, the 3% tax. We are showing a significant increase in those revenues in 2022. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question for clarification. And where did you get where do you get that information about business revenue?
Anecdotal, I believe.
Yeah.
CEO.
Yeah, at the BC assessment presentation, that was some of the information that was presented in that meeting. Blanking on who came to present to us, but the deputy assessment done. And so some of the comments that were made there is that the development of commercial assessment is partially based on the revenue that's generated from properties. And so an impact to that assessment value it was demonstrated and that when it remained constant, we saw that dip in revenues in 2020 related to the pandemic impact assessment values for a couple of years. We're always 1 year behind when the assessment values for the valuation period. So we're hoping that the 2023 trends will show an increase in the commercial class. We don't know.
That, my question was just answered.
That was the assistant, was she the assistant deputy, Mariana? Was the presenter, and I've got her presentation if council wants to discuss that further. We've received some preliminary 2023 information on assessment trends from BC Assessment. At this point, again, very preliminary information. Residential values have increased nearly 21% over 2022. And the business class, class 6, has increased as well, 8% over 2022. So those will become important when we start to look at the tax rate bylaws and any revenues that we are seeking from taxation in order to support our operating capital budgets. Sorry, I had a slide here that I've got here, but not there. So our next steps in terms of the financial planning information. So the non-market change reports, so the mid-November report from BC Assessment that I just mentioned, we've received. We'll also receive the what's called the completed roll and a revised roll from BC Assessment in January, March, respectively, that we will utilize to propose or provide scenarios, what the tax rates could look like from those values. So those would be looked at in the January and March meetings. Those in March as well, we'll receive the requisition amounts and tax rates from other agencies. So a reminder that we collect taxes on behalf of other taxing agencies, and those would be the regional district and hospital districts, BC Assessment, the school and police taxes as well, and the MFA is also there, and library. So we collect on behalf of those agencies. So those requisition amounts will be known when we consolidate the whole tax rate by law and be factored into the rates. I know there's a lot there, so if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any. Not seeing any. I will turn it over to. Apologize, I'm stuck back here. So this is corporate services. So financial services, we provide the financial planning for the district in terms of the operating capital budgets. We manage the financial finances for the district, property tax collection, revenue collection, and we also provide the support for the IT, which is growing in terms of its in importance and the ability, our time to focus on, where we need to be for data integrity and what kind of controls we need. So that not only the money to provide, for that good support, but the staff time needed to manage that is really increasing. Legislative services is another area under corporate services. So this encompasses council committees and commissions, the management and development of bylaws and policies, records and information management, FOIPA. We've got the district communications and digital media here as well. Elections and intergovernmental relations is part of that. and any other statutory statutory districts duties of the district corporate officer. Anticipate slide. So as I mentioned earlier, in the Q3 update, that council chambers and office space upgrades, we have the $80,000 budget. We've got some additional or some new cost estimates to upgrade the space. And I believe, and maybe April could support that conversation a little bit more. She's got a little bit more eyes on it than I do, but I understand requirements in terms of the HVAC system in this room really requires some upgrading, which has increased the cost of the renovation. So we anticipate to have a more final number and funding sources in our next stage of the budget. Questions, comments?
If you have a specific question about something, we can always email it to Nyla. Those questions answered.
Thank you, Deborah. So in the community services department is the community programs department. So the big one is services, programs is within services. And just as a refresher for council, because we have had some organizational changes recently, this now includes culture. So primarily around visitor infrastructure, because we do utilize the RMI funding for this, as well as public art and supporting planning and development of events and services, as well as filming on location. We have a staff person that is 1/3 funded by Tourism Tofino, who our culture and events programmer, who oversees this section of the department. Community Children's Center, which is of course the operation of 18 early childhood spaces, and recreation, which is community program. And while we normally think of sporting and active type activities, there's it's actually quite broad, and there's a lot of health and wellness as well as arts and culture programming as well. Everything from fly tying to macrame to the more traditional things like soccer and baseball. Not a lot of projects in this department. It's primarily operational, except one very large project, which Erin will help us discuss shortly. So these are the approved projects. These are previously approved by council in the financial plan. One is for a small covered patio. Given the budget here, it's more realistically an awning, something to help cover that small patio space outside of the community hall. Just expand programming, allow people to go outside on maybe not 100% sunny days and use that space a little better. So that's previously approved and is in the budget for 2023. The recreation strategic plan, this again is previously approved by council, is to be completed over the 2023 and 2024 budget years, and will be done in conjunction with the Parks and Trails strategic plan. So likely, the same consultant coming in to help facilitate that process, and will span both departments. So I'll work with the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works on this. Community hall kitchen upgrades. This was covered earlier in the Q3 presentation. Council's probably been hearing about kitchen upgrades at the community hall for a number of years. We are really hampered by the lack of hydro capacity at the hall, not just the larger lack of supply within Tofino, but at the community hall itself really is completely maxed. We can't add even a light switch right now at that facility. Again, community hall upgrades largely, deferred to such time that we have hydro there. There is a thought that with the construction of an indoor recreation facility, we would be bringing in 3-phase power and then would feed the power back to the community hall. That, of course, requires us to build the indoor recreation facility. So it's sort of a chicken and the egg. We'll see which one we get to first, but none of this happening in 2023, happening in 2024 through 2026. One, I know it's slightly covered by the text there at the bottom, 2026 portable trailer, thank you, $30,000. And that was, again, we cannot add any kind of facility there at this time because of the lack of power, but, expanded programming space, office space, we're looking at options for a little bit more room up there. indoor recreation facility. So Aaron Rogers has really been the lead on this to date, and bit of discussion, I think, to happen here. And I know council is interested in this project. So I'm going to ask Aaron to, I don't know if you want to come stand up here or take this from your seat. I think we were going to show you the pretty pictures first, just to, we did complete a Class B design this year for the facility. So these are some of the rendering. That would include obviously a large gymnasium space separated by a dividing wall, as well as a multi-purpose room, office spaces, with the idea that recreation, the entire community programs staff department would move up there and operate out of that and provide more oversight to both this facility as well as the community hall. But now we'll go back to the other slide, and I'll pass this over to Aaron, and then Peter, our manager of planning services, is going to come and speak to his projects after this. And then I'll be back up here.
Good morning again, Mayor and Council. I know some of you have been familiar with me over the years, and I sometimes have a quote. So just to this past slide, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So the nice pictures was the sugar, and here's medicine. So I think I'll just get right to the point. The last time this was in front of council, it was significantly less than $14.7 million. That's the current price with a Class B estimate. So last year, council approved staff to take $125,000, get our plans to a level of detail that we're comfortable with, that we could go out to market. That include also some updates to the program to make it more accessible, to make it more green, and so that we would be aligned with the GCIB grant. So there's a Green Communities Inclusive Building Grant that the federal government puts out. It's a 60-40 split, and we are pursuing that grant. And so to pursue that grant, we upgraded our plans. We made sure it lined up. And lo and behold, we end up with a $14.7 million project that includes a 15% contingency. So that's what it is. As we get further, we understand this pricing. I will say, apart from the aspects of this that make it net zero, it's a very simple building. It's a square box with basically a veranda put around it. We are where we are in 2022 with the prices they are. As we went through this last year, or the design process this year, we worked not only with the architects and the engineers, but we also hired someone separately who are a construction company that's done buildings of the size elsewhere, and do work in our community. And so we were having a conversation between the designers and the builders at the same time to try to bring costs down as we work through it. So we basically value engineering the project we went through. And then we had the construction folks price this out at the end. So this is obviously a project that we can't move forward unless we get a grant. And even if we get a grant, we're still looking at about $6 million of district funds. You know, how that's funded, whether it's through debt, whether it's through other forms, perhaps paying for VIP parking, I don't know. I just know that this is the number, and it's a lot to swallow. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the process any questions about the building, what it can be used for. And I don't have any answers for you about the $6 million if that's what we needed to fund to do it. I can say from my previous position, community sustainability, that a recreation facility of some sort, whether it ends up being it's not, is a vital need for our community. That's something that we've been missing for a lot of years, and I still hold true to that. I wish that we was in 2022, and I wish we'd done this in 2020. Here we are.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. We've been at this a long time together. Just a quick question on the federal green grant, we'll call it. In terms of timelines for that, getting the yay or nay, is there any indication of when that might be available?
Yeah, through the chair to Council Steer, we've been told it's an imminent. That the grant is going to drop imminently for about 1.5 years now. So I haven't had any further updates. I reached out to our MP and to the potential funders probably about 4 months ago now to check in, or maybe a little bit longer, maybe 6 months ago, and there was no update at that time. So at this point, I don't have an answer for you, but staff can look into that again and see what we hear.
And maybe just to follow up, maybe for some of maybe the new counselors, in terms of the next process, say there was a successful grant application and we moved into potentially the 6 million that would have to be made, whether it was through borrowing. There is a process that we would have to go through. I don't know if it might be premature to explain what that process might look like, or but if we were successful in the grant, maybe that might be the time to have that conversation. I don't know if there's a quick Coles notes or.
I could ask Ms. Satiana just about what we would do if we were to fund a $6 million project that would yield the borrowing bylaw or the alternate approval process. I know you're much more you're up to speed on this more than I am.
Sure, thank you, through the chair. Yeah, first we'd have to assess whether our borrowing room would allow for a $6 million borrow. And if it were to allow that, we would have to go up to the community to seek approval. And there's a couple ways we could do that, and I won't go into the mechanics of that just now for simplicity. So it's something that now that we do have a number, we'll go away and work on some funding models and come back to council for a more fulsome discussion. That may happen outside of a budget meeting, so we can allow more time for this discussion. And I do also expect to have some conversations with council, likely through the strategic planning process, and where this may fit in terms of timeline and priority. So I think that's probably all I'll add at this point.
I know that at one point there was the BC government had grants for mass timber projects. Was that ever explored?
Yes, Mayor Law, we've explored that at length, and the architects that we selected for this project were very interested in that same work. They spent actually time in Germany researching that, and so when it came time to looking for, we were looking to build it, then we would go back and explore that. A big piece of why this ended up being a net zero building was the use of mass timber, glue lamps, basically. If you look, I'm just going to go back to the picture because I think this is feel good. There. So you can see there through on the right there, the inside of the potential gym, that's all glue lamps. It's all been, the structural engineers have gotten very involved on it. It's a very detailed design now. And again, you have to hit certain metrics, and a lot of those metrics we were able to hit because of use of mass timber. And so if we were to proceed, we would be talking to the BC Wood Council or whomever it is about that. When I looked back at it, I haven't looked at those grants in about a year and a half, but they were, I think, in the range of a couple $100,000, $500,000. They weren't like millions of dollars. We would obviously be looking at all grant opportunities that we could if we decided to move forward there. Anything we could, we would do. Yeah.
And just another question. We had significant interest in the community to raise public funds apart from taxation, apart from grants. How would that look? And how does the district work with individuals out there who may want to donate to our children and youth and elderly?
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So if we receive a large sum or a sum for a specified purpose through a donation, we would typically set up a donation contract and receive that amount. And then we'd enter into a contract to expend those funds for that purpose. And I'm thinking fairly large amounts. Like if we do have donations to the vertical evacuation project, and we make sure that we have an agreement established between the donor and the municipality so that we're accountable for those funds once received. So we'd likely do something very similar to that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I mean, is rec board going to do some fundraising for this?
Well, there's now your new, but it is an advisory committee at this point. So in their terms of reference, I believe is out there. I'm not sure if fundraising is a part of that, but certainly with the I won't call it the collapse, but with the commission gone, there was certainly within the commission, there was the ability to contribute, for example, for those early class B estimates, et cetera. In this case, I'm not familiar enough with the new advisory committee in terms of what that may entail, but I certainly would suggest that that would be a conversation they could have.
Through the chair to Councillor Steer. Fundraising is not part of the new advisory committee's terms of reference. It is an advisory board to council. So they will advise council on, perhaps matters related to the facility, but they wouldn't go out and roll up their sleeves and do fundraising. There are other groups in the community, and the Tofino Community Enrichment Society comes to mind, that often has fundraised for facilities, the Tofino Skate Park, the bike park. They did raise funds for things like that, and they are a society, so they are able to issue tax receipts and things like that.
Yeah, I could just add the pickleballers or a force.
Access to big funds.
Okay, thank you.
So again, Mayor and Council. I'll be speaking a little bit about Planning Services Department, as well as some of the projects that we are hoping to do over the next couple of years. Planning Services is responsible for planning development. So these are a lot of things that you see me in regular council meetings for, from development permits to zoning and those sorts of things. The Planning Services Department also encompasses emergency planning. So this is everything from building up the district's emergency planning capacity and program, as well as public education, notification procedures, those sorts of things. And then we also have a lot of recently kind of the Planning Services Department has taken on a lot of the kind of community services projects, RMI funded projects, and other related capital projects. I believe Ms. Fremont will be coming up to speak about those. And then we also have building inspection under our department. There are no particular projects related to building inspection, as you might expect. So starting off with planning, these are the approved projects. I believe there are no proposed changes for any of these projects at this point in time. The one that I just did want to note was, again, the mobile population census. Again, our approved budget is $35,000. $25,000 of that is from contribution from community partners. As I mentioned earlier today, those contributions never materialized this year. So going into the year of 2025, we'll be probably looking for a bit more sort of a substantial commitment from those partners and to ensure that we actually do have that budget available for the project. At this point, I'm not sure if there's any questions about any of the approved projects, but if there are none, maybe go for it. Yeah,
I do have a question. Noting, and I've talked to our CAO about this, noting the new premier's announcement on changes to legislation coming with municipalities and housing. It's going to weigh heavily on our housing needs assessment report. And I'm wondering, as we go forward, is there a chance to move some of these plans around to sort of, fast track them, or is it? I'm just wondering what the rationale is for putting it at 2026, if there's a reason.
There is a rationale. The requirement for the district is that we do it every 5 years, and we did one in 2021, and so the next one is sort of due in 2026, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the rationale. I believe we could speed it up or fast track it if we were so inclined. The other advantage to kind of having it at 2026 is that there's many other municipalities that also have to do it at that time, and there may be more grant funding opportunities at that time. So reducing the burden on taxation. And again, as we did in 2020 and 2021, we partnered with other West Coast communities to kind of, we all pooled our money to hire one consultant to get an ideally a bit of a better product, a better report at the end of the day. So I think that's kind of the reason between those two things is sort of the rationale for having it at 2026. It could, of course, be moved up if we wanted to do something like that sooner. It just may be a bit more of a burden on the taxation as well as may or may not be necessary, I guess, is, not totally understanding how the province's kind of new plan is actually going to affect Tofino. It may or may not be necessary. Yeah, I think maybe let's leave it at that, but that's sort of the rationale for why we have it scheduled for 2026 at least. Thank you. Councillor Steve.
And just quickly related to that, similar question, but we were building in-house capacity, I believe, for the ability to do the housing needs assessment. Would that still be correct?
That is correct. So the idea here, $15,000 is actually a fairly light budget for a project like this. So the idea here would be that largely it's done in-house, probably by our senior planner. So that was the position that I was in up until recently. We're still recruiting for a senior planner at this point. That goal still remains the same. Of course, 2026 is a little bit of time away from where we are right now. So it'll be interesting to see what the capacity is in that position, who's in that position at that point in time. But that's the goal, is that largely the work is done in-house to reduce the cost. Should that not be feasible and should other grant opportunities be available, maybe it will go out to tender for a consultant as well. But that's currently the plan, is to kind of use the staff capacity to work.
For the chair, wouldn't it make sense also to do the population census before the housing needs assessment? Seems like they're sort of related.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through this, that's correct. The mobile population census is scheduled currently. The next iteration of it is scheduled for 2025. We've been trying to do it approximately every 2 to 3 years. In a way, a lot of the way we kind of work through our timeline for these projects is leading into an OCP or an ICSP update. So we've seen 2024, we're looking to update what our vision to action is now. So that's our integrated community sustainability plan. So that's basically our vision to action was adopted in 2014. 10 years later, we're looking to kind of refresh that one. Ideally, we'll have our OCP and zoning bylaw kind of updated by that point. So then we just start the cycle again, more or less, where we go back to the top. Okay, where we're going to be refreshing our top plan again, and then the mobile population census feeds into that type of information, as well as the housing needs assessment report. So these two things will feed directly into our larger OCP update, which is scheduled for 2026 as well. So the idea is that each of these projects do contribute to the next one behind it. And so, yeah, the mobile population census is scheduled for 2025 with the housing needs assessment report scheduled for 2026. Thanks for pointing that out. Any further questions? So looking at a few of the ones that are perhaps approved, but maybe had some scope or timeline changes, the development approvals framework. This is, I mentioned this earlier today as well, where it's in progress, we're moving through it. However, it will be moving also, the timelines to essentially change so that it's part of the 2022 budget, but it will also be part of the 2023 budget. This is a grant funded project, again, looking to streamline the development approval process, largely looking to provide, more housing, more affordable housing, in line with many of the province's directives, as well as many of the policies and goals of our own official community plan and other guiding documents. So at this point, there's no changes to the budget. There's just a change to the timeline. Zoning bylaw update. Again, I mentioned this earlier. There's no change to the budget request. However, there is going to be a change to the timeline. Again, this is due to largely staff capacity, the change of the organization, and we're looking to begin this early in the new year. The environmental sensitive areas report. This is a kind of a 3-year project. The budget request is for $15,000 a year between 2023 and 2025, so a total of $45,000. This is the continuation of a project that was begun and completed, I should say, this last year, which is the more robust mapping of environmentally sensitive areas within the District of Tofino, specifically focusing on riparian areas and streams that are currently not mapped. One of the things that we've noticed within our planning department is that we have some fairly robust environmental development permit areas. However, they don't connect to a larger overall vision for the community. And so we often have biologists go in and work on one specific project for one discrete parcel of land without much consideration for how it may affect the area downstream or upstream. This environmental sensitive areas report is going to ideally help us guide our land use decisions, particularly around riparian areas, a little bit more effectively, and looking to kind of maintain contiguous habitat and restore these areas that may be doing well on one property, and then if you go next door, they've been filled in by gravel or something else is going. So the ask is for $45,000 over 3 years for that project. Back one here, back three. Municipal forest strategy. The project timeline for this is the year 2024. The budget request is for $40,000. This project is really essentially designed to define a long-term vision for the forest and trees in the district's boundaries. This would come out of the earlier this year, presented to council kind of a plan for a tree protection bylaw. The consultation work for that is kind of going to be beginning shortly, and hopefully a bylaw will be brought forward for council's consideration early in the new year related to that project. This would be sort of the next step. If council would like to proceed with this next step, it requires some fairly specialized mapping as well as some other specialized knowledge that is currently outside the scope, outside the capacity of district staff. We've had a quote put in from a consultant. It's a couple of years old, and it was in the low $30,000, and that was a couple of years ago. So our budget request is $40,000 to put together a municipal forest strategy. We would be working with consultants in this case. However, there would be a significant amount of staff time, largely through the senior planner and the manager position, likely to kind of guide the development of this forest strategy. This would involve significant community consultation as well as some other field work that would help us establish really a community vision for forest. Again, it ties into the previous project where we would be looking to establish an overall kind of idea of how we want to maintain forest rather than just looking at things on a parcel by parcel basis, which is what we have done largely up until this point. The official community plan update, this is scheduled for 2026. This project was approved. I believe we are asking for a slightly larger budget. I think the budget request was initially for I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe it was about $25,000 or maybe $20,000. We've in an effort to have a bit more robust public consultation as well as have some more robust legal review. Our budget request at this point has been added to $50,000 or up to $50,000. There's been no change to the timeline though proposed for this. Again, going back to the previously approved with no changes projects, a lot of the integrated community sustainability plan refresh, mobile population census and affordable housing needs assessment would be leading into this OCP update. The current OCP was adopted in 2021. It's good practice to try to update or renew these OCPs every 5 years or so. So that's why we've put the timeline at 2026 for that project. That's all from planning. Are there any questions related to those projects at this point? So we'll move into emergency planning. Again, as noted earlier, our emergency planning coordinator is not in town. I believe I can speak to most of these projects, but if there are some very specific questions, they may have to be deferred until he returns, and I can provide an update to council at that point. So the approved projects, these ones, no change. Will be this coming year, looking at an emergency program strategic plan. This is kind of a refresh of the plan that was initiated, and this would guide the emergency program over the next several years. The approved budget is $10,000. There's also a tsunami siren audibility review. This is essentially a study that helps us understand where our tsunami sirens are actually audible within the community and helps us plan where additional ones should go. And then a new tsunami siren is proposed for 2024. Sorry, any questions about those projects side at this point? And moving forward, community recovery framework. This was an approved project in the previous budget. It was mentioned earlier today as well. Due to provincial legislation, the project timeline has been changed. The project's been deferred until 2023. I anticipate that the relevant provincial legislation will be released in the spring of 2023 with this community recovery framework project to begin shortly after. The vertical evacuation tower, this was also touched on this morning. Essentially, the overall budget is not changing. However, the timeline is changing. This is a fairly complicated project, a lengthy project as well, not something that will be completed typically with 1 year. There's also a significant part of the funding comes from grants, and so ensuring that those grants are available is also a contributing factor to the overall timeline. This project is in progress, but will also continue to be in progress likely for the next couple of years. I touched on it a little bit earlier. It's essentially a large structure, vertical structure that will allow particular low-lying areas that are at tsunami risk without an easy access to a tsunami evacuation location to have a place to go in the event of a large tsunami. And that's all for me. Are there any questions at this point about the emergency plan projects? So I'll pass it over to the Director of Community Services to talk a little bit about RMI initiatives or RMI projects.
Thank you, Mr. Thick. RMI. I'm my glasses. So just one previously approved project here, which is the future years RMI. As council will recall from previous budget presentations, we usually have one project sheet for the upcoming or the current year's multi-use path redevelopment. And then we have a second project sheet, which details out a future section. So this is for 2024. There's no change here. This was previously approved, 100% funded by RMI. Tofino Theater venue improvement. This was touched on this morning during the Q3. Again, this is no change. It's previously approved, but is being moved forward to 2023. And that is a contribution from the district to the theater renovations. Tofino Free Shuttle, the budget request is $250,000. We just completed the third year of a 3-year contract with the service provider. So we will be going back out to the market for service provision. A lot of things have changed since we entered into that contract in, I want to say 2019, labor costs, fuel costs, likely much higher. So we are expecting a little bit higher of a contract price. Multi-use path upgrades. So this is for the 2023 year. So the upcoming year, and this would do the second half of the Hotels Edge to Tree Frog Lane section. If you travel the multi-use path, you will know this section because it is the worst remaining section, really bumpy. A lot of tree root damage does need to be replaced. The budget for this has increased. We are going to a 4-meter standard now, as we have for the past couple of years. And we did see higher costs this year for asphalt, labor, trucking, that sort of thing. So it is a higher ticket. It is 100% funded through reserve municipality funds. Tonquin Bridge replacement. So this is the first time council will have seen this one. And this is for replacement of the bridge. There's a single bridge on Tonquin Trail proper, so not the boardwalk stairwell section, the older section of the Tonquin Trail, but the new and last 10 years or so, a section of trail. There's a single bridge there. It just passed the second set of stairs down to the beach, if you will, that is was constructed during the original construction of the trail, but has been assessed. We do have it assessed every couple of years by an engineer, and we are unable to take any kind of heavy equipment across this bridge. The timber will not support the load rating, if you will. We can still bring our maintenance vehicle across it, which is the small orange Kubota that you've all probably seen driving around town. And the park staff do use that, and public works staff to maintain the trail and service the new washroom that is closer to Middle Beach. But the trail is becoming in rough shape because we aren't able to get larger equipment, mini excavators, dump carts, that type of thing with loads of gravel, et cetera, across it. So we are looking at replacing this bridge. This would be proposed to be funded through RMI. And this is, I know I always say, oh, you can't do operations and maintenance with RMI. And the program has been updated recently. And I think I highlighted this when I was giving the orientation around RMI, where the province will make an exception, provided it is infrastructure that was installed with RMI funds, which the bulk of the Tonquin Trail was, and it needs a, kind of a one-time significant redevelopment. And so this is a case where we would be able to use those funds. And this is something that the province has indicated that they would be in support of. So this budget request amount is really, it's very preliminary. It's really a placeholder at this time. We have begun design work, geotechnical work, surveying, that type of thing on this bridge. It's a difficult site to access. There's a lot of fallen trees and branches and things like that make assessing this quite difficult, but it is proposed to be completed or a design would be completed later this year or in early 2023 and would come back to council through the budget process with a better number for what this would would cost to replace this bridge. And we don't know what that would look like. Would it be a prefabricated bridge that would be lowered into place? Is it constructed on site? It's also an environmentally sensitive area that is crossing over a fish-bearing stream. So there's some constraints that way that we have to work through, and we've engaged support from that for the biologist. Any questions on that one? Because that is the first.
Yeah, if I could ask through the chair, so just looking for clarification, you're talking about the bridge over that like recent wind blow
Yes.
area?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so given that the trails after there are quite rough and rooted and narrow, is there really a specific need to bring heavier machinery over that bridge if they can't progress much further past it? Or is this because we're maybe looking at upgrading those trails?
The idea is to upgrade those trails. The section beyond, because it is so difficult to access, has fallen into somewhat of a disrepair. We've had drainage challenges, and without being able to get equipment in, it's hard to address those. The trail is quite narrow in some sections as well, which poses a concern for bringing in, for example, the maintenance vehicle with staff as they go to clean the washroom, or maybe they're cleaning up debris, fallen trees, things like that, fixing drainage, anything like that. It's quite a hike in there with your bucket of cleaning supplies. So it would be nice to be able to have the maintenance vehicle access those locations a bit easier. So the idea would be once the bridge is completed to be able to do some work to upgrade those trails.
Cool, thanks.
Campbell Street Phase 3. So this is a continuation of the downtown vitalization work, which was designed in 2011, and we did the 4th and Campbell project in 2013, Campbell Street Phase 2 in 2014, and then 3 phases of improvements on Main Street. So this is a fairly significant piece that is still remaining. We have 100% completed design that was funded by grant for the final 2 blocks. The original cost estimate for the full 2 blocks was around 3.1 million, knowing what we have been learning about construction costs in the past year or so. We did have a new cost estimate developed in the summer of 2022, so this past summer, which puts the updated cost at 4.47. So we are looking at a higher cost. This is not yet fully funded. It's a large chunk of RMI would go to this, but RMI can only fund the surface improvements. It's not funding any underground infrastructure, roadway upgrades to the highway, et cetera. So this is still in a sort of a holding pattern, if you will, and it's been forwarded to 2024. Protective services, I'm going to present this just as there's only a couple of slides. So obviously this is the bylaw enforcement department, business licensing, bylaw education, Tofino Volunteer Fire Department, which has 30 members, ongoing training, fire inspections, and call response. Just one project here, I believe, Host Compliance. This is a software that the district utilized a few years ago that tracks short-term rentals online and assists staff in identifying properties that may be non-compliant or operating without a license. For the past couple of years, we have not used this service. Staff have connected with the service provider again recently, and there are some new modules that may be useful around address identification, compliance monitoring, and they've somewhat expanded the services that they provide. So 23,000 is being proposed to bring this back online in 2023. And then one slide, I believe, for fire department, which is the turnout gear, so replacement of equipment, radios, and biannual replacement of turnout gear. At the November 8th council meeting, council may recall that staff put forward a request to have a grant approved for $25,000. The community, what is it?
CEPF.
Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, I believe, for the $25,000, which would increase the amount of turnout gear, as we have fallen somewhat behind in replacement of that gear that the firefighters use when doing what they do. Any questions on those? Hearing none. Infrastructure and Public Works.
I'm just gonna excuse myself for a few minutes. Make this small.
Good morning again, Mayor and Council. You've got about 30 slides to go to the end of this, so this is about a third of the budget. So I'm happy if you want to take a pause before I really dig in, but it's not going to off to that.
Let's do a 4 minute.
Good morning, Mayor and Council, for a final time. Today we're going to be, this morning, right now, we're going to walk through infrastructure and public work budget for 2023 to 2027. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the slide. We talked about this a lot yesterday, but basically this is an overview of what the infrastructure and public work division takes care of. So before getting into the project slides themselves, I just wanted to talk briefly about setting infrastructure priorities and on how, you know, how we've done it and how I think we may want to consider doing it. I think obviously we spoke about yesterday, asset management. Oops. It's okay. Doesn't want to go back. Thank you. Asset management, I think, will be the process that we start looking, the lens that we start looking through to help to make these decisions. And as I said yesterday, we're just, even though we've been working on this for many years, we're just really trying to get going this year and into early next year. One aspect I'd like to explore further would be focusing on areas of infrastructure repair and upgrades. So currently we could throw a dart at a map of the district, and anywhere that map landed would probably show us some type of infrastructure that needed replacement, whether it be water, road, or sidewalk, or whatever. And so looking at infrastructure replacement, you know, with a very narrow focus may not be as helpful for us as looking at it with a broader focus. So let's look at areas that we have lots of stuff that need to be done. So we're not putting down, you know, new road on top of old pipes. And so that's, as we move forward the next couple of years, I'd like to start shifting that conversation to areas that we can address a number of different aspects at once. It also allows us to be more efficient. It allows us, we hope, to get better pricing. And it also, what it would involve is a coordinated approach across the districts, so across our divisions and our departments, to make sure we're lining up with RMI programs or development applications coming through Peter in the planning department. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. Currently what we have is a number of condition assessment reports over the last 20-25 years of different infrastructure that's never really been collated. So I think Fraser did an amazing job through the water report that he provided us in August, that took all of the water reports, stacked them out, and then came out with that report. And that is something that probably needs to be done in all the different areas. And that will be part of this coordination. The Water Master Plan project we talked about yesterday is going to address everything: water mains, leaks, complaints, condition assessments. We're going to look at Mears Island, and then we're going to start weighing risk about that. So as I said yesterday, we have reports that will tell us our AC mains need replacing because they're X amount of years old, which is great. But we also have infrastructure on Mears Island that needs replacing. And when you start looking that into a risk matrix, like the likelihood of something happening versus the impact of it happening, you start to think about, well, maybe it's more important to deal with the Mears Island stuff sooner rather than later, because the impacts to the community of that infrastructure failing is very, the impact is very high. Not only because of the importance of the infrastructure itself, but actually the location of it. So for example, let's just say we decided not to repair a water main on Neil Street, and that water main failed. It's a lot easier for me to get a crew or consultants out to Neil Street and get that repaired and dealt with within a week or so, versus having to organize dealing with significant infrastructure in Mears Island, which means boats and helicopters and barges and all the other stuff. So I just want us, as we go through this water master planning process, to start thinking about risk and where our biggest risks are, and then start working through our asset management program based on that. That's going to take some work. And I think this is something we're going to start in the water section, but then move through systematically through our different infrastructure assets and do it one at a time. So we'll develop a process through water, which would be the same process, but different items, through sewer, roads, parks, facilities, and fleet. And then again, finally, yesterday we spoke about drainage at some length, both in my presentation in the morning and our tour after that. And just again, reiterating that climate change is going to impact our drainage system. That is very informal, and it's something we'll have to start paying more attention to along the way, and potentially starting to direct more funds to that direction as well. Sorry, Nick, it's. I just wanted to touch on the road priorities before I get into the project sheets, and this is because I think this is something that's come forward to council in the past. And there's been a lot of conversation about which road to address first and for what reason. So that we have two condition assessments, one done in 2013, which is quite thorough and very detailed, and then we have one in 2021, which is less so. In fact, it's just two. There's two reports, and those are both graphic reports. There's no words to them. Looking through those and sifting through the information, I would assess that the priorities in terms of roads alone would be Mackenzie Beach Road, Lynn Road, Arnett Road, and Fourth. And so the idea moving forward into the budget process will be, I mean, you could pick any one of those, they all need replacement, is the idea of trying to again stack up opportunity. Do we have an opportunity to replace this? Do we have an opportunity to grant? Is there development occurring close by? Are there other opportunities that may help us move forward? I think I just wanted to highlight that for council as you start to see these the budget slides, how I've been thinking about this. One way that I've been told by our consulting engineers to think about the condition of our assets is through complaints. And so again, we talked about yesterday, 5 complaints about the water main on Main Street, for example, is a pretty good indication that the asset is failing. We don't necessarily need to run a camera through there at cost. Again, looking at our infrastructure through a liability lens, where do we receive the most complaints from? Where have we been challenged in court because of someone injuring themselves or damaging their vehicle? And then again, opportunity, which is what else is happening around there? Do we have opportunity to work with the development team? Is there an opportunity to use RMI funds? Is there a new grant opportunity from the province? In terms of sidewalks, again, that's something, as I said earlier today, we haven't really moved forward on this year, partly because of the resourcing of staff, but partly because it doesn't seem to fit anywhere. And I would like to think about the sidewalk issues in Tofino in a more holistic manner. Again, in the idea of stacking projects. It will be something we look at through the asset management program. I do have the multimodal transportation plan that I can refer to show us the gaps and areas that we may want to complete. So I have that, and we can use that as condition assessment for now. We may want to consider a more fulsome sidewalk master plan in the coming years, maybe. Yeah.
Question. And so in the interim, in terms of prioritization of what sort of matrix would you use then for sidewalk? I mean, you touched on the multimodal transportation plan, but is there something a little more quantitative that?
The multimodal transportation is pretty detailed, and it'll show us our gaps.
Yeah.
And so what we should be doing, and I'm not quite there yet, but will be for next year, is saying, okay, I think we need to replace the Neil Street. I'll just bring Neil Street. We're going to talk about Neil Street, but for example, Neil Street, we have a fully designed water main that's AC that we can repair. We funded for it because council put aside money a number of years ago. We have a Village Green improvement project that April's and her team will be working on that will have aspects of sidewalk and parking. And so it's looking at it in that way. I have a gap. We have a gap between Third and Second Street in terms of pedestrian access. That seems like a great way to spend some of that sidewalk money. So that's how I'm at it right now. Looking at it right now is pretty like in that focus of areas of stacking. And maybe into the future, like 2 years from now, we'll have master plans everywhere, and then we'll bring them together to sort of look at lenses and see which ones make the most sense. Part of what's going to help us is in the budget this year, I've allocated some funds towards purchasing software that we're currently using for our TC or Tangible Capital Asset Program that has a GIS function that allows you to put all your infrastructure in there. And then what that does is you can actually run reports to identify, this section of road, the sidewalk is in this condition, the water is in this condition, the sewer is in this condition. And so we should be able to speed this up a little bit because we're going to be able to assess everything in one look at it. So I don't have a better answer about the sidewalks. Again, for me, this is I'm fairly new to the role and jumping into the budget process pretty soon after I started. My hope is by next year, I'll be able to I'll have a bit more information to provide council with the information that you need to make better choices about infrastructure renewal.
I may, thank you, Mayor and Council. One thing that council may see throughout this budget process is the combination of multiple projects where they may have been separate before. We're pulling some together in an effort to have a result in a more favorable budget for the project. So if we can combine multiple projects and expand the scope, then hopefully we're going to get better pricing in this market. As council is well aware, we are getting pricing back on single projects that's quite high. So this is in an effort to try and minimize the impacts on budgets as well.
I think it's a great point, and I think also I would add that we have this opportunity as well as construction being right now. We're building a massive infrastructure project, which means and there's a number of other projects being built, such as the THC E114 buildings. That means we have a lot of contractors in town that we've never had before who are now set up long term. These companies are bigger than just the projects they're doing here. And so even though construction costs are quite high, we may see some savings as well if they have the capacity to help to bid on some of these projects that are going to go out. So I see that as an opportunity as well. Sorry. Oh, next slide, please. Okay, so let's get into it. The first slide I have for you is the Mackenzie Beach Road full pave. I think we're all familiar with Mackenzie Beach and its many potholes. It's been a challenge for our operations staff on a yearly basis. This project would upgrade the current gravel road to a fully paved road standard. It would include a new beach access, pay parking, and washrooms. We've received numerous complaints from numerous people about numerous issues on this road. So we get ICBC claims probably on a yearly basis. We get injury claims from pedestrians and cyclists. We have dust, which is affecting the health of the folks and the people visiting the resorts at the end of the road there, as well as the dust is also settling into the fish bearing stream, which still has salmon in it and has been a concern for the Sloper First Nation. So in terms of going back to my earlier slides, complaints, Mackenzie Beach Road is a source of complaints. There is a new grant opportunity that council will be we'll see in our December council meeting about this. It has a price tag of about $2 million. We think grant funding could cover 25% if we were successful in the grant. We think there's an opportunity to introduce RMI funds into this for the beach access. And so this is one of these projects. I think there's opportunity for us to be less impacted to the community. So in the absence of moving forward with this project, my recommendation, and you would see as a January council meeting, would be to a lesser project where we would chip seal the pavement. I don't think we can go through another summer of gravel, and the chip sealing is probably between $200,000 to $400,000, depending on what it looks like. The lifespan has been told is 10 years for a chip seal. I think in Tofino it's probably more than 5 years and maybe less because of the amount of rain we get in the potholes. So I just wanted to put this out there. This funding source are pending. Council will be reviewing a grant application related to this in December, and I think in January we can come back to council with some more accurate numbers about how we think we can pay for this.
Yes, I may add a little bit more to this one. It's pretty rare to see a grant opportunity for a roads project. So as Aaron mentioned, we're seeing a bit of an opportunity to be able to prioritize this project. While the funding is only at 25%, we typically don't see grant opportunities for roads. It is also an opportunity to contribute RMI funds to a project like this to increase the pedestrian access and the use of this access to the beach. We did come to council and present on road priorities at the last budget meeting and chose to remove all capital works related to roads. We are bringing this project back in particular in advance of doing, more work on roads priorities and establishing that through the asset management process, because we do have a grant opportunity. So that's why council is seeing this today, and there'll be more opportunity for discussion at the December 13th council meeting.
Through the chair, if I may, would this be something where the capital and infrastructure levy could be applied as a funding source?
For a portion of the project, we likely could. So we do have a road base asset related to this road. And that's basically all that it is. So it is considered a road base at this point. So we could utilize a portion of CNI levy, but it certainly wouldn't be a significant amount because the majority of the cost for renewing it is including. And further growing the road base, which would sort of expand the road a little bit. So it's a renewal, but an addition at the same time.
Just a quick one. I seem to recall there was some tentative offer from Resort or two on that road to help out. Was that, am I off base there?
No, so in a previous zoning amendment for Mackenzie Beach Resort, we negotiated a deal where the district had access to their property to develop this idea. And they and received access through their property to the beach. And in return, they were allowed to use some of our property. So that's all, those are legal agreements that currently exist. The intent is for them, it's supposed to be this fall, we're still having a hard time connecting, for them to do an initial stage where they would do some clearing and moving some stuff around and get us the initial design, like the space would be there, there'd be some ties, some gravel, but it would provide us parking and access sooner rather than later. With this potentially moving forward, we're just sort of waiting to see what happens at the council before we go too far there and spend money that doesn't need to be spent. So there's less cash there from there. First, we have an agreement to get to the beach now, an agreement to get the bus loop in. If this project were to move forward, one of my next steps would be to contact our lawyers and start talking about trading land for good. And there is a process to follow for that, where we give up a piece of road and the developer gives up that and this becomes permanent, versus what we have as an agreement right now. I've spoken to the resort owner about it. They're open to that conversation. But again, I don't want to get too far down the road until we know whether we want to move forward with that. So.
I just have a question through the chair. If we just do the resurfacing, what was the term you used?
Chip seal.
Chip seal. If we did that, is the grant opportunity available for that, or is that full pay?
Likely not. So what I did with the grant, the application, was we did the redesign, and then we broke out the design of the whole road, and we broke out the portions that this grant would cover. So this is granted a BC Active Transportation Grant, and so deals with multi-use paths and beach access is basically, or cycling, pedestrian infrastructure. So the portion of this budget that's related to those items is about $600,000, and the grant application, I think it's a 70% or 75% split, is $440,000. So potentially, if we were willing to kick in another $150,000, we could have a paved multi-use path down one side, and then access to the beach. That's kind of on a very conceptual level. I'd have to talk to engineers about whether it makes sense to put a paved multi-use path next to a chip sealed road, or if that's just something that's going to have to get torn up again when we do it properly.
And through the chair, if I may, Aaron, Mackenzie Beach Road has been chip sealed before. It's a similar treatment. Have done at the same time as the section of Arnett Road that goes to the community hall, and in our rainy climate, the soil moving beneath the surface, it really doesn't last long. And so it has returned to and is now maintained as a gravel road. So the chip sealing has been tried once before on Mackenzie Beach Road, and it's not a very long lasting solution.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing this go through. Hopefully, maybe we could make it just one giant mop and share it.
I love it. Does council have any further questions about this slide? Sorry, Nikki. Next slide, please. The Arnett Road storm improvements. Hopefully I can get through this before Mayor Law move on. But so this is a project that we planned for 2023. It's intended to address issues we have along Arnett in terms of drainage. So we have, again, no formal drainage here, and we're hoping to address that. The reason I've brought it forward now is because we're going to be doing work on this road through the wastewater treatment plant project this spring and summer. And so the idea of trying to take advantage of opportunity when it comes is something that we're looking at. It's a large budget request. That number is a placeholder. We have engaged our consulting engineers to provide us with a more detailed project cost, but it's going to be in around that number. We expect those back in the next couple of weeks, and we would come forward to council with an updated project sheet about that. We do have funding sources through CNI levy, so this may be able to get done. If this happens, we're going to have to move pretty fast because of the speed and the process of the wastewater treatment plant. So this will be new to council, and it's fairly new to us as well. So any questions about Arnett Road?
Is that just an opportunity because of the wastewater treatment and your ability to, as you've been talking about, the compatibility of getting those done?
Exactly. It's an area we've received complaints about, with flooding and overland flooding and undermining of properties. We're going to go right through there. We're going to be digging up the road. We're going to be putting pipe down. Again, I'm sorry it's so late, but I see it as an opportunity to perhaps do that if we had the funding for it. And so that's why it's introduced. I know that council is going to have a lot of decisions to make and priorities to do, but I want to make sure that at least you have a full understanding of all the stuff that we need to do.
If I may, through the chair, is the current rain garden that's there part of like the drainage solutions that were found? Is that something that's been useful?
Yeah, through the chair, I can speak to the rain garden a little bit. So the rain garden was to replace aging, really non-functioning pipes that took what was really road runoff. So runoff coming down First Street, often full of oil, problematic materials, and then was dumping straight into the stream. So through the installation of the rain garden in conjunction with other partners, we're able to filter some of that out. So it's really just isolated to that location and picking up some of the drainage coming off First Street.
Further to that, one of the aspects that our engineers will be looking at will be two options, basically exiting the water through Cedar Street, where we were yesterday at the lift station, the first lift station we visited, where the outfall is. So perhaps we can go that way. Or we may be able to come back all the way to that and hook into the drainage there. I'm not sure. It's part of what we're working with the engineers, but yeah, it's a good point. That is kind of a primary point of drainage for us in that area. There's also a problematic culvert that I think the culvert feeds in there from First. It feeds out the back of the school between the community. Is a big deep gully. There's a lot of water. It goes under First Street and exits there, and that's problematic as well. I don't think it's part of that project. Maybe, but probably not. Maybe I can pause there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to we're going to recess for lunch, and before we do that, I'm going to appoint Councillor Anderson as acting chair for the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you.